Council will call the meeting order for the record. Is February 17th, 2026 at 4:30 PM. We'll begin this afternoon's work session with roll call attendance.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Councilman Cavanagh.
Here.
Councilman Taylor. Councilwoman Strader.
Here.
Councilman Whitlock.
Here.
Councilwoman Little Roberts.
Here.
Councilman Overton.
Here.
Mayor Simison.
Here. Next item up is adoption of the agenda.
Mr. Mayor,
Councilman Overton.
one small change to the agenda. We're going to take number 6 off of the consent agenda for staff discussion. Other than that, we want to adopt the agenda as published.
Second.
Have a motion and a second to adopt the agenda with the moving item 6 to off the consent. Is there any discussion? If not, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. You guys have it, and the agenda is agreed to. Next up is the consent agenda.
Mr. Mayor,
Councilman Overton.
stated before, we're going to move number 6 off the consent agenda for discussion. Other than that, the consent agenda, I move it's approved for the mayor to sign clerk to test.
Second.
Have a motion and a second to approve the consent agenda. Is there any discussion? If not, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. The ayes have it, and the item is agreed to. Item 6, which is moved from the consent agenda, which is the final plat modification per Roslyn subdivision, MFP 2025-0003. Who would like to be recognized for discussion on this topic? Yeah. Bill.
Mayor, members of the council, thank you. So this particular application typically go on consent agenda for your approval. If the council remembers, this was before you in July of 2024 with, if I recall, 5 lots. And during that hearing, there was a lot of testimony from the adjacent neighborhood about reducing density on this particular property. And so council went ahead. The item was continued for several months for the applicant to come back with a revised plan. And ultimately, the applicant landed on 3 lots. And that is the combined preliminary final plat that you all voted on and approved back in July. Well, since then, the property is sold to the applicant. He is here this evening. This is a public meeting tonight. So it's not a final plat modification does not require a public hearing. So basically today, I'm just giving you the history and letting you know what the applicant is, what they're modifying currently, what's been approved to what they're doing tonight for your consideration tonight. So essentially, when council approves a combined preliminary final plat or a final plat, the applicant has the ability, or the property owner, I should say, has the ability to come back and change the lot count. So the code does allow for someone to reduce the lots, but not add buildable lots. So that's really the purpose of the application to you before you this evening. Is originally the council approved 3 lots. The applicant wants to reduce it from 3 down to 2. Now with that, there are some changes to the conditions of approval. The original 3-lot subdivision had a common driveway. With the 2-lot configuration in the staff report, that common driveway is no longer necessary. The new lot has the required street frontage requirements of the R8 zoning district. So a common lot is no longer necessary. And the existing residents that stayed on one of the lots and the ADU that's currently constructed on the lot meet dimensional standards and the city code requirements as well. And they take access from the local street that abuts the property. So again, your direction to the applicant was no more than 3 lots, an ADU, a duplex, a single family home is by an allowed use in the R8 zone. So what the applicant's proposing as part of this modification is all code compliant and meets the dimensional standards. They can do a duplex on the lot by right. So they're asking for your approval of that modification this evening to go again from 3 lots to 2 lots. And if they do want to build a duplex on the property, then they will be required to go through administrative design review as well. So essentially, the applicant is going from 3 lots to 2 lots again, but with the potential of 4 dwelling units total. And again, everything meets code requirements. Happy to stand for any questions, or at least help fill in the blanks if you have other questions about the project.
Council, any questions for staff?
Mr. Mayor,
Councilman Overton.
just a confirmation. So when we originally approved this, an ADU was not part of the discussion, nor would it have ever been part of the discussion.
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, members of the council, Councilman Overton, that is correct. When the subdivision come to you, obviously the applicant gives us elevations for single family detached homes, but The lot sizes at the time were 4,000 square feet. The likelihood of getting an ADU on that property was probably pretty slim. But if they were to design two homes, those lots still could have had the single family homes and an ADU on them. The council, again, when a subdivision comes in, that's not really the purview of the council to determine what dwelling units go on the properties. It's how many lots and do they meet the dimensional standards? And that's what the council acted on, is if they met the dimensional standards of the R8 zoning district, not what type of dwellings were going on those lots.
Mr. Mayor,
Councilman Cavanagh.
I guess then, Bill, that brings up a good question for me to help me improve in my role. To your point, I think the discussion at council was really sympathetic to the concerns about density in that small area of land. And so moving forward, if council in a future application has those similar concerns, should we be then instructed in our motion to prohibit duplexes or ADUs if that's something that we are opposed to? Because while I hear you that we approve dimensional standards and zoning, if the concern is density, I need some direction about how I can best address that concern while also still maybe moving forward with an application request.
Mayor, members of the council, I would advise you against prohibiting certain residential types in zoning districts, because again, the zoning code allows for those types of things. That would be something that would require a code change. I'm sure Mr. Neri would have some additional verbiage for you or some commentary on that as well. But the reason why it was so critical during the first round for your approval is because when we have a common driveway, the code requires them to show you the footprint of the home to ensure that they can meet the setbacks and how the homes are going to be oriented on the common driveway. That's what our code requires. So now by losing that requirement, there's no need to see the footprint on that particular lot because there is no common drive that affects it. So essentially, if he goes to build a duplex on that property, he just needs to meet the dimensional standards of the setbacks of the R8 district, which is 20 feet from the street, 5 feet on the side and 12 foot on the rear. So essentially what I don't want the council to perceive this as another loophole. I know we always seem to get that verbiage in our zoning ordinance. It's being mindful that these are things that are allowed in the zoning code. No one's trying to undermine the council or go around what the code would allow. It's somebody, if there is a process to do this, they're here to change it from, again, 3 lots to 2 lots and provide a different housing type, which 4 dwellings, 3 dwellings, could have been 6 dwellings. If the applicant would have showed you ADUs or some single family homes on the lot, we just don't know. But at the time that it came before you in 2024, your direction was no more than 3 lots. And we're down to 2 this evening.
Mr. Mayor.
Councilman Cavanagh.
Bill, and maybe this is a future meeting topic then, because ultimately then how I feel is if we don't have an ability to grant an annexation or a zoning request and limit the amount of density, then we should be voting no more often than we are. We're a council that has worked towards a yes. But I disagree with you. I feel this is a loophole that's being exploited, and I don't like that. And so after we get to our main meeting, I think council should expect a request for a future council agenda, how we're going to address this, because when we hear from the public, the council makes a commitment. You know, if we're adjusting something because we have concerns about density, which has been a reoccurring topic for the last 15 years at our council. And I think that I'm taking an action that addresses that. And people leave this meeting thinking that it's addressed, only to find out that at a later point in time, it can be exploited. That's something that is important for all of us to know. And we need to do a better job up here. We need our staff to do a better job to close those loopholes from happening. So I recognize we're going to disagree on if this is a loophole or it's not. I believe that it is. I think we as council, if this is a concern of ours, need to do a better job of addressing it. So I appreciate you being here and giving us that explanation, Bill.
Thank you.
Mr. Mayor.
Councilman Overton.
I totally concur with Councilman Cavanagh. I feel like we've gone from council makes a decision that says there's this many lots to now it's just a suggestion. Taking some of that power away from us on effectively saying what that development's going to look like and what kind of promises we can make to the residents of Meridian. And in this case, especially, we were very, very cognizant of the density on this small lot, only to have an ADU come into play. I was concerned when we approved ADUs initially, wanting it to just be an old town until we saw how the use of ADUs worked and played out within our city. Kind of afraid of something like this happening, where these can happen and take a development that we've already approved and turn it into something with more density. So I agree 100%. I think we're going to need to talk about this and see how this plays out. Not on big projects, but on these small infill projects. This is going to become a major concern going forward.
Council, any additional questions? Okay. Are there any motions? Well, there has to be a motion one way or the other. I mean, it can go both ways. So, or can we not take action on something, Mr. Neri?
Mr. Mayor, members of the council, no. You're gonna have to, there's no legal basis to deny the final plat based on our code currently. So it is, again, it would have been a consent item otherwise. The discussion, I think, was put on the record what's been provided, but there really isn't anything else in the code to deny it.
Mr. Mayor,
Councilman Overton.
based on legal's review, I believe he's 100% correct. This is not the applicant's fault. This is not our staff's fault. This is the way this got implemented and is being used. And I think that we owe it at this point, and I'll make that motion, that we approve number 6 from the consent agenda, which is MFP 2025-003.
Second.
I have a motion second. Is there any discussion?
Yeah, Mr. Mayor,
Councilman Cavanagh.
be voting in opposition. I don't think this is consistent with the preliminary plat that we saw. And so I will not be voting in favor of this motion tonight.
Additional? If not, all in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Post nay.
Nay.
The ayes have it. The item is agreed to. Okay. With that, we'll move on to item 8, which is, item 9, which is the agreement for provision of water and sewer services outside city limits with Jason Nyhouse for parcel number S1108. Okay. Mr. Dolsby, we're just going to turn this over to you. My eyes still are not there to read.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This is a request to connect to city services by this gentleman. He owns a property and the well on his property has failed. So he would like to connect to services. He's contiguous with the city. He's okay. He's agreed to annex as well. So he just wants to connect, annex, and come into the city instead of repairing a failing well, and he'll abandon his septic as well. So stand for any questions.
Thank you. Council, any questions? Okay.
Mayor,
Councilman Whitlock.
be appropriate for a motion at this time.
Yeah, unless is Mr. Nyhouse here? Does he want to make any comments? Okay, not requesting. So yeah,
Mr. Mayor, I move that we approve agenda item number 9, agreement for provision of water and sewer services for parcel number S1108438530. Just wanted to read that into the record.
thank you. I appreciate it. Have a second?
Second.
Have a motion, a second to approve the agreement for number 9. Is there discussion? If not, all in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. The ayes have it, and the item is agreed to. Okay, with that, we'll move on to item 10, which is 2026 water and sewer assessment fee increase proposal. And turn this over to Director McVeigh.
All right, thank you, Mayor and Council. So this is a discussion to talk about our proposed increases to water and wastewater connection fees, also sometimes referred to as hookup fees or assessment fees, all the same thing, multiple names. So as a reminder, we completed a cost of service study for the first time in 2014. And as one of the recommendations in that was to try to review our assessment fees every 3 to 4 years. So we are following that recommendation. The last increase to those fees was in 2022. So we're due for that. And before I jump in to discuss how these changes are calculated, it's very formulaic, but I kind of wanted you to see the overall picture before we talk about the numbers. So it is a combined increase of $578, so $182 on the water side and $396 on the sewer side. The other important component is that we were proposing that this would go effective in June. A couple of things on that. It gives us time to get through public hearings, but the other part is it gives the development community some time to prepare for these increases. So they appreciate that. So a little bit about this methodology. So like I said, very formulaic. So we use the Loomis method for calculating these. There's a lot of different methods, but this is the only one that has been legally tested in Idaho. So we feel very confident that this is a justifiable, defensible fee. So essentially, these fees represent a new development's proportional buy-in into our existing systems. So as I mentioned, we use formulas. We take the replacement value of the system minus unfunded depreciation, and then we divide that by our total system capacity. So over time, our system value goes up, but our capacity also goes up. And then we take that number and we multiply it by the number of ERUs per gallon per day. And that gives us a fee for each ERU basically of buying into the system. So the nice part about using this methodology is that it's very transparent to development for our residents. It's fair. It is an equivalent buy-in for each gallon into the system. And because we're using the Loomis method, it's generally accepted by the development community. So just a little bit of history. We don't increase these fees very often. So the last increase was in 2022. Over the last 10 years, we've only proposed, including the increase today, four increases. If you annualize those, it's between 3 and 4% per year, which kind of makes sense with our system growth and our system capacity. One of the things that's, I think, important to look at is how we compare to others. So we are today about $2,100 less than the Treasure Valley average. With our proposed increase, we'll still remain well below that average. So we have actually already completed some outreach to the BCA. We did both a letter and then also an in-person meeting. Of course, no one's ever excited about new fee increases, but they actually gave us compliments. They said that they appreciated that we are communicative and transparent. They don't get that from every city. They also really appreciated that we notified them in advance of time to phase in those rate increases so they can kind of plan that into their business process. So no real major concerns or opposition from the BCA. So with that, kind of what our next steps look like is if you guys are okay with us moving forward, we would then complete noticing and do a public hearing in March. And then that would be when you'd officially vote those increases in if approved, and we would make the effective date in June. So with that, any questions?
Thank you. Council, any questions? Councilman Cavanagh.
Like a couple questions. One, more specific to your ask, one's a little bit more holistic. If council doesn't approve the rate increase, what does that mean to you? What does that mean to the department? What are the changes that you would have to make to address the impacts that you're foreseeing?
So good question. So if we aren't receiving that portion of the revenue, we would likely have to make it up in our rates. So,
Okay.
um,
Mr. Mayor, follow up.
Councilman Cavanagh.
Lorelei, you're the first that's going to hear probably a reoccurring theme from me over the next few months as we move into budget season. As long as I've been on the council, staff, the city's talked about, hey, we're going to be at all of our fees one time a year. So we get everybody on track. So because it's hard for me as a council member to kind of keep my head on a swivel, what new fees are being requested. So help me understand why a 4-year difference between why we're making that request. And I think I know the answer, but help me understand kind of what has prevented you or kept you from coming on an annual basis to keep track with inflation and other anticipated costs.
So twofold. The first one is there's two fees that Public Works brings separately from Todd's citywide fee update, and it's our water and sewer rates and our assessment fees. We could certainly talk about consolidating those into the overall update, but I know one of the discussions with the water and sewer fees is that it's one of the few fees that impact every citizen in Meridian versus some of the more pay for some service or use. So we can certainly talk about that if that's the direction. The reason that we don't bring these forward every year is just historic practice. Generally, those numbers don't change really rapidly. It's especially our capacity number. The reason being is that our projects don't come on in incremental. It's you have, I'm just making this up, but 5 MGD capacity today, and you do a couple big wastewater projects that jump you up to 8. So those in between years, there may not be very much difference in those. And so those numbers don't change drastically besides every couple of years. We certainly could look at it every year, but.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Mr. Mayor,
Councilman Schrader.
would you mind flipping back to the formula?
Mhm.
Thank you. I think this is helpful for me as I'm thinking about that same topic. I think it's a good topic heading into budget season. But I take your point that the inputs in this case are not anything that changes frequently. So where I think other fees, it's like really critical to keep up with inflation to me, just based on your formula, that really wouldn't protect us that much here, because it's really like large projects that would change it. I did have a question about what is an ERU?
So equivalent residential unit, so essentially represents like a single family home. So that's what, per house that a developer puts in, those are the fees that they're paying.
Or more, Mr. Mayor?
Councilman Schrader.
So how would that apply? Like, does that apply similarly to like a multifamily scenario? Like, I'm just kind of curious, like, how does that unit of measurement get applied to different property types?
Yep, great question. So they have, when I say they, it's both our finance team and then also the community development team. They have formulas and equations to do multifamily and then also commercial, a couple of different methodologies, but they basically attempt to show what impact that would have as it equates to a single family house, whether it's more or less. Fixture count is one method that they use.
Thank you.
Any additional questions for Lorelei? Okay, then I guess we'll see you back here in March.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, with that, we'll move on to item 11, Ada County Highway District 5-year prioritization follow-up discussion. Yeah. Mr. Hood.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. We'll try this. Brian's gonna drive the presentation and I'll do the speaking. At least that's how we're gonna plan it out. So you all should have a memo in your packet. I'm gonna basically work from that. There's some companion documents, some spreadsheets that we'll spend a little bit of time on, but the background memo contains a lot of the information. I'm not gonna read all of that to you, but again, sort of an outline for this afternoon's presentation. So, excuse me. Annually, the city does send our list of roadway intersections and what was previously referred to as community programs project priorities to the Ada County Highway District. And annually, they update their 5-year plan. It was previously the 5-year work plan, but they're now calling it the 5-year plan. And for this 5 years, it's 2027 to 2031. You can see the schedule there. The mayor was sent a letter kind of kicking this process off in January. Our Transportation Commission Subcommittee, Prioritization Subcommittee met on January 20th and met for a couple of hours or so and then forwarded on a recommendation, and the full Transportation Commission reviewed the priorities and sends this recommendation that I'm carrying forward to you today on February 2nd. So just a couple of weeks ago. There are a couple of things maybe so you can see again, harder for me to see. Hopefully you can see that. by the end of this next month, so we do have some time this year. I'm hopeful that maybe we can get through it today, but if I need to come back, we certainly do have some time. We got 4, 5, 6 weeks anyways before the deadline to get our partner agency project requests to ACHD. Typically, we draft a cover letter and highlight a couple of projects, do some thanks for what they've done for the community recently, and then continue on with our asks. And then it'll go on through the rest of the year. And I think that's important for a couple of the changes that I'm going to highlight for you here in just another minute or two that the Transportation Commission is recommending to you. Locust Grove. So I know you all talked with ACHD and their commission here about a month ago now, I think it was, about the Locust Grove, Meridian, which one should we do first discussion. Transportation Commission talked about that as well. And they actually thought that Locust Grove would be of greater benefit to Meridian to build out earlier. Again, both priorities being important, but prioritizing that. That leads me to the sort of the first change to our priority list would be South Meridian and a section of Locust Grove between Victory and Amity. I'm the one that actually kind of brought this up to the commission's attention during their February 2nd meeting. I wasn't at the subcommittee meeting, but Brian says that the commission, that subcommittee did talk about potentially advancing this segment of Locust Grove Road being constrained with some of the things that are happening on Meridian Road and the intersection even at Amity and Locust Grove still not having really any progress made there. So the first major change is to move last year's number 7 priority project, which again is Locust Grove Victory to Amity, up to number 1. And that would displace, so this is kind of a 2-part.
Brian, can you put up the list so people can see? Thank you.
And this is a 2-part one. And when we were having the conversation at the Transportation Commission, I'm not here to sell it to you necessarily, but that was some of the discussion. And I think the Transportation Commission was sensitive and have listened to you all before and were a little hesitant to move our current number 1 project down, which is the Linda Road overpass and the widening up to Franklin Road. But some of the information we've been given from ACHD is once a project goes into construction, it really doesn't matter about the plan anymore. They're implementing it. So we essentially get 3 bullets every year, our top 3 projects. So project priority number 1, and I don't really want to jinx us, it is in construction and they're going to have phase 2 of the Linda Road overpass and the roadway widening is going to be let this month. And so that one, by the time, I know we just changed to the list of priorities, but that schedule, by the time ACHD considers this, they'll be actively in construction on Linda Road going north. Again, knocking on wood, but all signs are pointing towards them continuing to invest in that road. And again, their PS&E is ready to go and likely award the bid here in the next couple of months. So little bit of risk, I guess, in that. But when we only get 3 projects for our whole city to have them really say we're serious about, I think the Transportation Commission kind of came around and we still have it as number 4. Not saying it's not a priority, but there's really nothing to do at this point. The project's designed, it's partially built, and it's moving forward. So that's the biggest change of the year, is to move our previous number 1 down to number 4. And it isn't, again, construction in this year. Again, the 5-year work plan is 2027 to 2031, and it's planned for construction in 2026, 27. So I don't know if I need to pause, but I will so I can read my notes. I don't have any comments on that one. That's a pretty big deal.
I'll make a few comments, and I guess it's they put it on the list. Why did they not take it off the list? Because I understand what you're saying, but I'm like, if they put on the list because they still want to be prioritized, I don't like playing games with something, because I think it's a little disingenuous to move it out of our top ones if it still has a reason why it should be on their list. So I guess that would be the question, whether that's for you or for ACHD, is why do they have it on the list for these years if it's not part of their plans?
So good question, Mr. Mayor. Just to clarify, so all that ACHD does is give us back our list. So this isn't their list. In fact, if you look at one of the next changes that the Transportation Commission made, it was priority number 8. Is that right? It's later in my notes. Another U-stick, there's a U-stick segment that actually was in construction that's still on their list or our list. And the Transportation Commission said, take it off because it is in more active construction, right? It's being widened right now between 10 Mile and Linder. So I think it was number 6 or 7 last year.
So would that be a
5?
better
5
approach?
last year.
Just remove them from our list or create a part of the list that said
Yeah.
under construction, not ranked?
Mr. Mayor, I think that's a good comment. And again, I was trying to, I don't know which is better. I like that option too, because we're not trying to play games, but I didn't want to send another, what I think is a worse message, but I don't know that it would even be received is if it totally went away. We aren't trying to say it's not a priority for the city. So I encourage the Transportation Commission, just move it outside of the top 3. It's still a very important priority for the city, just not for the programming process. So, but I hear what you're saying and wouldn't be opposed if we just removed it because we're following their rules of saying when something is in construction, you can take it off of the list. Maybe that is a better option to just remove it. And again, I'll take responsibility for that. I'm the one that sort of led the Transportation Commission to that. Again, they were a little sensitive to moving it even down the list. So that's.
I mean, personally, I think if ACHD says it's okay to take it off, I would take it off rather than moving it down. Because I think moving it down sends the wrong message. But I would defer to what their direction would be on if something's under construction, how they value that or don't value that. And then I'll just say this for my own, since I guess personally, I failed to see how this item got moved into number 1. Again, I live right here. I drive this road and frankly, ever since the roundabout got put in at Victory and Locust Grove, we're heading that direction. I don't see near the backups that used to occur on this stretch of road, but I also don't go too far this way in this. So I'm curious how this one really rates versus the other issues, even though it's a big issue that needs to be addressed long-term. I just don't know it's higher than Locust Grove from Victory or from Fairview to Ustick. I mean, I see that as being something that has a lot of problems compared to that segment of roadway to go from 7 to 1. So that's.
And Mr. Mayor, fair comments, maybe just to get a little bit of the context, the recent history here. Again, that was one that I brought up to the commission to say, wasn't necessarily advocating for number 7, but being opportunistic. There's a bridge that's being designed, and we've talked about this before, but it's only being designed to 3 lanes. So they're going to start investing in this mile segment by putting the first, and some of that conversation was, well, this is throwaway cost. I'll liken it to the railroad crossing on Black Cat, although it's not exactly the same, but it is only 3 lanes as an interim bridge. And then someday we've got to come in and widen it to 4 or 5 lanes. So it was more sending a message like, are you sure you want to only design and build this to 3 lanes? Why don't we look at this whole corridor and see if maybe 4 or 5 lanes is more appropriate? So that's why it sort of leapfrogged up to the number 1 is because of that bridge being designed right now and then potentially even being constructed, I think next year, 27, I think is where it's planned. So that's the why, not saying it's right or wrong, but that was some of the reasons why it jumped up is because of its companion design for the bridge and having them evaluate that. And again, recent correspondences and communications we've had with ACHD, asking them to preserve the 100-foot right of way for potential 5 lanes along these arterial roadways and not doing something to 3 lanes. And then in theory, having to rip it out to widen it to 5. So.
Just personally, I'd rather focus on encourage them to do 5 rather than moving it up. If there's other priorities that have been further, that's just me.
Yep.
I mean, again, this is.
Mr. Mayor,
Councilman Willock.
can I just go back a little bit and talk about moving those projects off? If this is our document and our list, could we create our own category to celebrate a victory? I mean, could we have a category, maybe even at the very top, that says these are under construction, hooray, let's move forward, well done. I too don't want to just pull them off the list that they've seen and suddenly have them say, where did it go? why not highlight it and say, this is
Great.
success. Let's celebrate.
So, Mr. Mayor, if I can respond, and I think that is totally possible, I will, if my Vanna will maybe scroll to the bottom, because right now they are at the bottom. So mentioned the U-Stick project being removed. Right now, we put them at the bottom and we don't celebrate them maybe like we should, you know, but we do say under construction, you know, it's being removed, and then the why, again, fourth line from the bottom, you know, guess it doesn't say that, does it? Is it the fifth one? Yeah. Yeah, right there. Brian's highlighting it. So priority number 5 down to the bottom, but I like that approach. You know, again, start with the positive. Hey, here's the projects that have gone into construction this year. We're excited, especially if we add Linder Road to that list and put it up there as an assumption that, yes, you've constructed this and we like that it's still going to be constructed. So I think that's I see some heads nodding. So I think we can make that without needing to be an official action or anything like that. I think it is our list. We do share it with ACHD though.
Mr. Mayor.
Councilman Cavanagh.
Caleb, Brian, first, thanks for the memo. I really appreciate it with all the exhibits. It's years past, I always feel like I've got like my iPad open. I'm looking at lots of different things real time. So I appreciate you guys kind of all compiling into one document. Here's a couple of observations from me, and this is where I need some guidance from you all. There's 32 projects that are on the list. Only 5 have a design year. Only 2 have a construction. One's Linder Road overpass. The next one is what, Fairview and Locust, I think, in 2028. Feels like there's a lot of roadway priority projects that are needed in Meridian that are on this future list. Is my concern about the lack of prioritizing projects in Meridian recognized by the highway district? Are they hearing from us on this? Are we an example of all the other municipalities? I mean, all the other cities only going to have one project completed every other year? Help me understand kind of where we're sitting in terms of the regional prioritization, because I recognize I'm going to do this from Meridian eyes,
Right.
but it feels like that we're on kind of the tail end of any type of roadway projects that are planned over the next 3 to 5 years, when so much what I see is in the future. And as we saw last year, even if it lands on a year, they sometimes scale it back. So help me understand kind of where
Yeah.
we sit in a true priority.
Mr. Mayor, Councilman Cavanagh, I'll be honest to start, I didn't do an audit of all the other cities and how many projects, but in general, looking at the 5-year plan and knowing what ACHD's gone through over the last 18 months and the cost of construction of projects, they have had to scale back. So Meridian isn't unique in that we're getting, you know, we had 10 or 12 projects that we're moving in the 5-year plan down to 5. That is fairly consistent across the board. So there's geographical equity, if you want to call it that, amongst all cities, and that ACHD's list of projects that they can afford to do is smaller and smaller all the time. The need grows, but the pot of funds to actually do the projects doesn't grow at the same speed. And so, yes, there's a lot of need in Meridian. There's a lot of needs everywhere else, but we're not being, and again, I hate to sort of hesitate because I started with, I haven't actually tracked that
Yeah.
across all cities year over to see how many did Boise have last year versus this year and 3 years ago. But knowing what's in the plan generally, they've had to scale that back because the land costs more, design costs more, construction costs more. So they just can't do as many projects. And that really came to home to roost last year where, you know, if you would have looked at last year's, we had a lot more, I don't remember the number, in the 5-year plan, and it scaled back, but that's not, again, unique to Meridian.
And maybe to add to that, however, though, with the change, with the increase in the impact fees, they are expecting to
Add some.
grow stuff back into the plan. At least that's their intention, because they will have more revenue, but they'll have to see how the revenue comes in. So it may not be as reflective in this 5-year work plan. It may be in the ones after that, before they see how much more, you know, what is the growth pattern? What is the revenue?
Sure.
But in a lot of ways, you know, the Linder Road overpass was a very large project, and they are planning for a couple very expensive projects up north as well, which are, meaning there's fewer all throughout the entire plan.
Mr. Mayor and Caleb, I guess this is what my takeaway is that I don't like is that I look at this and I see 60 to 70 years worth of projects, many of which need to be resolved in a much quicker than 60
Yesterday,
to 70
yeah.
years, right? And so, I mean, council, this is an action that we had to do to get the Linda Road overpass is, do we need to reengage with the commission on putting forth Meridian taxpayer dollars to get these projects moving? I mean, this is critical infrastructure that our city needs. And I don't accept that they're going to identify 2 projects that are going to be constructed on a priority document. Everything else is future to be determined. As a Meridian taxpayer, that's unacceptable to me. And I think that's probably unacceptable for the vast majority of our community. So I don't know what our next step is on that. If we need to start talking at a budget hearing about taking some Meridian property tax dollars to get projects accelerated. But we cannot wait 60 years to get these projects completed.
Mr. Mayor,
Councilwoman Schrader.
could you pull up the map, Caleb? That was up a couple of slides back. Yeah, I think this is helpful for me, at least just visually. So I appreciate the feedback from the Transportation Commission, and I feel like actually what we're going back to with focusing on Locust Grove is very consistent with what the Transportation Commission's philosophy has been in previous years, which has been this kind of a corridor approach to try to actually focus on corridors at a time so we can finally move the needle. Like if we don't do that kind of an approach and it's piecemeal, I don't think we get relief to our residents as fast as we could. I think at least number 1 and number 2 should be swapped at a minimum, if not number 2. I think there's a question around the current number 1 where that should go. I'm a little bit concerned about number 9, just because I feel like if we are going to focus on Locust Grove in the north part of Meridian as a corridor, to me, it makes sense for that to move up as a priority to try to get through that bottleneck. That has been a real issue. And if we're saying, okay, Meridian Road is not a priority, I think that's okay. I think there are good reasons for that. We have a fire station on Locust Grove. There are a number of other reasons. But then I think number 9, I think we need to revisit where that sits. Because that's just my initial feedback. The other piece of that, you know, I noticed there was a note about the pedestrian safety around Chateau and Locust Grove. I mean, we did have a pedestrian fatality there just not that long ago of a child in Meridian who, you know, sadly lost their life there. I think that needs to be a huge focus when that work happens, the pedestrian safety aspect on that particular project. So I just wanted to say thank you for pointing that out. I think if anything, that should have more emphasis. But yeah, I mean, that's just my initial feedback on kind of that first piece you mentioned about prioritizing Locust Grove. I'm supportive of that. I think it makes a lot of sense. I just think we need to be strategic about trying to get some complete corridors going to fix that bottleneck issue.
Mr. Mayor.
Councilman Overton.
Caleb, can you put the list back up one more time? Caleb, you know, I feel like you stand up here like you're a target when you're talking about this, because there's no amount of talking about this plan that's going to make any of us happy, because we have to admit in the end that even if we say, yeah, we like these top 2 or 3 projects and we agree, that means there's 30, 40, 50 projects that we know we're not getting done. And it's hard to get excited about that. My hat's off to our Transportation Commission for identifying Locust Grove. I think that's the right corridor for the right reasons. But I'd like to see those top 2 priorities be the build out of Locust Grove from Fairview to Ustick, as well as the build out from Victory to Amity. And I think at that point you would have 5 lanes all the way from Amity to Ustick. That corridor would be much bigger and greater and flow better than it does now with the choke points it has. Having the Locust Grove from Fairview to Ustick being a higher priority to me makes more sense logically because the intersections are done. If we do the 5 lanes from Victory to Amity, I noticed that the intersection improvements at Amity are a whole other project down the
Mhm.
road. So we're still going to be taking that 5 lanes and running it to 2 lanes in all directions. And it currently is a massive traffic nightmare of 4-way stop as that happens now. So I have a hard time not also wanting to move the Locust Grove Fairview to Ustick to be the highest priority, just because I think it's going to go from signal to signal and provide the greatest relief immediately. Again, that leaves a lot of other projects way behind.
Yeah, I think for the most part, why some of this matters in some regards, I mean, you've got the program years on some of these items. Whether we made it number 1 or 5 may or not matter, because it's going to be the money. You know, how do things program with the money? What fits? You know, the Locust Grove to Fairview is one of the most expensive next level projects because of the amount of homes that have to be the right of way purchased through this area are going to make it very. And so, kind of going back to Councilman Kavanaugh's point is, we can do expensive projects or we can do cheaper projects if we want more versus less. But what has the greatest value impact, short term, long term? Through this. But ultimately, because we do have so many of our top projects already in a year programmed, I'm not gonna say they won't move them up, but they're gonna go move down the list till they hit the ones that they can move in if they do have those extra monies. So while traditionally our top 3 are the most important, I'd say your top 7 to 8 really have your value because they can look at them and add them in, especially if they have a lower cost. At least for this initial assessment.
So, Mr. Mayor, if you don't mind, just to piggyback a little bit on that, I think that's fair. And it's recent tradition. I mean, the director is the one that said top 3 from each city is the one we'll really focus on. So 7 to 10 to 15, we've held out hope that some of those would, advance sooner rather than later. So that's kind of gone back. But I do want to just real quick, and I wasn't planning on doing this today because you guys have been through this process before, but our list of priorities is only 10 or 15% of the overall programming. So really what drives ACHD's decision on where they make these investments is congestion and safety. That's what it comes down to. There's a cost benefit that goes into that, but it's where traffic's not moving and where there's crashes. So that's really what's driving a lot of the list. So if you look, some of the ones that are programmed are fairly down on our list in the 30s, and yet ACHD is doing something about it because there's an actual problem out there that they're trying to solve. So we do move the needle on some of these, but it really is your top few or so that really get their attention more to say, what are we missing here? We're not seeing the, the traffic volumes, or what's this anecdote that the city of Meridian's telling us we're not seeing it in the AM or PM peak or with crashes or whatever. So I think that's fair, but again, they're going to look at their data, absent anything we send them, and say, this is where we're going to invest the taxpayers' dollars. So good exercise, I think, to do this and do focus on the top 7 to 10. So we're positioned well and we're telling the story. I think that's, if I can, sorry, this is going a little bit more of a tangent. But the priority corridors, I think balancing that with geographical equity is something that we struggle with as staff, and the Transportation Commission even is. There's needs all over the place, to Councilman Kavanaugh's comment, So if we focus on a corridor, are we, for 10 years, we could, the last mile segment of Locust Grove up to Chinden, pretty low, 29. If we're going to finish that corridor, finish it all the way off. Why is it at 29? So, but it's like, wait, but we have 28 other projects that are actually pretty important too.
And it's probably the cheapest cheapest section of that entire corridor to do.
So anyways, there's a lot that goes into it. Yes, the top, 3 to 8 to 10 or so are the most important, but there's a lot of competing interests there.
Councilwoman Schrader.
Yeah, I mean, on that point, I think that's an important point because Chinden is one of the few places where I think we can move people quickly from east to west. And the bottlenecking that we're experiencing, I think it's really keeping people from utilizing that corridor more to get around. And it's forcing people onto places like McMillan Road where we have huge issues with congestion. I am a proponent of the corridor type of approach. Like I think that is the smartest thing we can do to try to get a quicker impact. So yeah, I mean, I'm in favor of taking a look at number 29 and seeing about reprioritizing that as well.
And maybe just while this is up, and I appreciate the comments earlier from Councilman Cavanagh, the orangish kind of color are ones that are actually have a design year or right-of-way year or a construction year. So that's the differentiation. So you can kind of see where programs are in the 5-year plan versus not. And then obviously the number that's in the box or the circle is the current priority for that project.
So Caleb, I guess I would say this. If we put one back where it was, and you essentially had the same list, the council's generally done, it still leaves Locust Grove as your primary corridor numbers, whether or not one should be 9 or one, if one went back to 7 and you took off the ones, the overpass, you're at 6, and then I mean, your numbers become kind of fungible. It's just really about what's the number, but you still have that corridor being prioritized with 3 top 8 projects in its current scenario.
And again, Mr. Mayor, I'll try not to advocate for any one project, but I'm going to jump back to a comment that was made earlier. A lot of your biggest bang for the buck is actually at the intersection. So Locust Grove and Amity, and actually still in the same corridor, but your intersections where you get the biggest bang for moving cars. So if you really, I mean, again, if we're talking about between 6 and 7, it probably doesn't make much of a difference. But I'm saying, like, those projects, if we want to win and something to show into construction and can really help with the traffic, moving your intersections up. So sort of related to your comments, Mayor, but it doesn't have to be 1, 2, 3, Locust Grove, but yeah, something in the top 7 or 8, 10, I think does send that message. But if you're going to move the roadway segment down, I would say make sure that intersection what's currently, and I just noticed there's two number 4s. What's currently number 5? Maybe that one's after the old number 7 or current number 1. Boy, that's not a very good way to say that. Sorry.
And since the one that you moved up that was 7, frankly, I feel very strong about our letter could highlight the thing you said. Why are you only designing to 3 when we have this as number 7 on our list, even though they're not, it's in their future. It shouldn't be that far into their future if they really do take our top projects at a higher value for their consideration. I would like to think that would get their attention enough to address the design factors related to that. But like I say, I completely agree with you on the difference that the intersection has made on the roads, more so than any other component. At least what I've experienced in South Meridian, so.
Mr. Mayor,
Councilman Overton.
just kind of a final thought on that same stream. If we left 1 as 1, then I think we owe it to ourselves. And I thought it was the way the county highway district was working. If they were doing a mile length of road, they would try to include those intersections into that project, but obviously they're not, they're separate. But if we're respecting the work done by our Transportation Commission, we leave one as one, then I think we owe it to ourselves to move number 5, the intersection improvements that should go along with that project up to match. That's logically the only thing that makes sense to me, is if we try to blend those two and have them done at the same time.
So excuse me, I thought I was getting some consensus, but now no, I'm not. I don't think, but just to clarify, when you say number 1, the new number, the proposed number 1, the previous number 7, leave that as number 1? Because I think I heard the mayor say he would rather address that in the letter, move that back down essentially to where it was. Top 10 still, but address that in the letter and say, hey, before you build this 3-lane bridge, will you make sure that it only needs to be 3 lanes wide? Paraphrasing, we'll do it more eloquently than that in the letter, but this is a priority. This roadway mile is important, and this bridge right in the middle, you're going to set the stage. But again, I think I heard conflicting. Not that you guys always have to agree, but I'm not sure how to change numbers if something that significant.
You did hear conflicting, but again, that's just
Yeah.
my 2 cents. But I do agree that we should combine the two. I don't think it should be 5 and 7, 5, 6, or 5, 6, 7, whatever you, however you want to. Yeah, I know. You said it twice. So I had to get it in once for you. But again, that's just my view on this, because I don't want that one bridge design to drive a higher prioritization for other more important things that have a larger, better value benefit. And I hope that they would see that. That's just me. I mean,
Irregardless for where it lands, I do think that's a good note for our letter. I do think that's important story to tell there and question to ask before they make an interim investment potentially with limited funds. If we got 50, 60-year build out, are you really going to spend a couple $1 million on an interim improvement?
that we want you to do in the next 5 to 7
Yeah, that we
years.
see this being a higher priority in the next decade anyways, to widen the roadway. So let's not throw away those funds for a short.
So council, do you want a week, 2 weeks? Do you want to give
Yeah, Mr. Mayor,
Councilman Cavanagh?
if it's okay, it's a product of good conversation. I was kind of jiving with what the mayor said, and then Councilman Overton brought up some good points. And I think, where we're clear is we want to continue to maintain locust as a priority. What segments we want to list in order, I think that's a bit of a larger conversation. So if council's comfortable, I would maybe request Council President Overton maybe 2 weeks. And the important part is if council's got ideas or their own power ranking list, should be sharing that with Brian and with Caleb and with the mayor, so that we can at least try and coalesce where it makes the most sense.
Councilman Overton.
2 weeks is fair. Caleb, is there any way we could get feedback from our Transportation Commission on, because I want to respect as much as we can their hard work going into this, but also if there's an understanding on why they're not tying an intersection into the mile-long segment construction project. There's a logical reason they're keeping those separate or not trying to bring all that together as one recommendation.
So Mr. Mayor, I may be able to just answer that question now, if that's okay. I think that wasn't a product of the Transportation Commission. By the way, I think the respect is mutual. I think they certainly respect you. And again, we're concerned about moving some of these things year over, and not trying to upset you all with some of those priorities, but being thoughtful in that process. But this is a product of ACHD. The days of doing a mile and an intersection are over. And so they're listed separately. Now, in our list of priorities, we can certainly have them back to back and the tags can touch. But and again, 7 sort of jumped up because of the opportunity potentially with the bridge. So I think that's essentially how they were looking at it was, we do need to do intersection mile, type of an approach. But it doesn't necessarily mean it has to be 1, 2, 3, 4. But that is ACHD, and we can list it sort of as a package deal, but ACHD is still gonna call it 2 projects.
Okay.
That's how they design and build projects. Sometimes on U-Stick, they'll actually have the project, one will bleed right into the next, and so you really can't tell. That's the idea, but they are budgeted and in GIS, and for all intents and purposes, 2 separate projects.
Okay,
Quick follow.
Councilman Overton.
So I'm in favor of coming back in 2 weeks, as long as there's an understanding that this is still going to be a very grumpy group of people on the fact that we have so many projects that we will not get to touch.
Before I walk away, Mr. Mayor, if I can, just spend 30 seconds maybe on, again, what's previously called Community Programs Project, what's now called Safety and Compliance. Not a whole lot to add, and again, I'll refer you to the memo if you want to see some of the slight changes. But I do have a request that came up recently to add a commercial street, which is just off of Eagle, between the railroad tracks and Pine. So there's a Jackson's kind of right on that corner. Life Church is right there. That's commercial. So commercial isn't fully improved with curb, gutter, and sidewalk, and I'm still trying to figure out why it was never improved, but it's pretty much fully built out these days. North and south side, Life Church actually is doing a big expansion, and they're gonna improve kind of their first part of the portion of that. But if you go back further to the east now, I should point that way. Further back to the east off of Eagle, there's no curb, gutter, or sidewalk. So I would propose we add that. It could be at the bottom of the list, but just have it be on the list. That's something that needs to be fully improved because it's basically built out back there and no development's going to come in and improve the roadway. And there's need now for more sidewalk, curb and gutter. Parking's becoming an issue and people parking on the shoulders and those types of things. So anyways, I would just ask that this hasn't been vetted through the Transportation Commission, but I would just ask that we add that to the end of the community programs list. Thank you.
Okay. The one other thing, Caleb, if you can, maybe if you want to get whoever you think is in charge of the prioritization over at ACHE, when projects under construction, how do they want us to treat them? Do they still want them listed? Do they not? Just hear from them. That way we know
Do it the way they want.
what the value of that being on the list or not on the list.
So, Mr. Mayor, again, as I walk away, if you want to watch the Transportation Commission meeting though on the 2nd, we had Edinson Bautista, who is overseeing that right now, explain that to our Transportation Commission about when it's okay to move things off of your list in the top 3 and some of that 5-10 minutes of your time if you want to watch that video on YouTube on the 2nd.
So they said it's okay to move them off?
Once a project goes into construction, it's okay to move them off of your list.
Okay, well, that's good to know. So we should just move them off the list and not further down the list.
Yes.
Okay,
Mr. Mayor,
Councilwoman Schrader.
I still really like the idea of just having a category that says under construction, right up top. Let's do that.
Yeah, no, that's what I said.
I like that.
Not giving it a 1, 2, 3,
Right.
or
No
6
problem.
ranking.
We're all on the same page then.
All right. Council, I don't know how long the next item would be to go. Do we want to do it now? Do we need to take a break? And it is on our 6 o'clock agenda as well.
How much, Mr. Mayor?
Councilman Cavanagh.
Maybe, I don't want to get over my skis, but if we could maybe get an update about how long they anticipate the conversation being. I don't want them to feel rushed, but I also don't want them to feel like they've got to be held over for 45 minutes to an hour if we're going to get it accomplished. So
We're looking at over there, Tishra, this is a 5, 10, 15, 30. But why don't we go ahead and start it? And if we need to continue it, we'll try to do a hard stop. 10 minutes, 10 till or 15 till. Okay, we'll do a hard stop in 9 minutes. Yeah. There are 11 by this clock down here. So you got 11 minutes
Great.
for this session. If not, we'll continue it on to 6.
Thank you so much, Mr. Mayor and
With that,
Council.
item 12, proposed updates to Meridian City sections. Go ahead, Tisha.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Mayor and Council. I have submitted to you a memo and 3 proposed city codes. So you should all have those. I won't read the memo to you since we are on a short timeframe here. Our first proposed code was required by the Idaho State Legislature. It is the camping ban that I'm sure you've all heard about. This would bring the Meridian City Code in compliance with that and allow us to ban camping as we've been asked to do. I can stand for questions on each one so that we can take them in order.
Council, any questions on that item at this time?
Mayor.
Councilman Overton.
Tisha, these are the ones we're talking about are ones we're going to be taking action on, not as a state code, not as a county ordinance, but as a city ordinance when we have these offenses. And they may be different from what the city of Boise currently has. We have something in place to make sure that when they are prosecuted until such time that we have our own prosecutors, that they will make sure that they will be prosecuting our ordinance.
Thank you, Councilman Overton. Mr. Mayor, we have a very similar code to what Boise has done on this one. So they would be, I don't see that they would have any problem with it.
Okay. Loitering.
Yes, sir. So the second proposed code is for loitering. This new law is a loitering plus code. The impetus for this code is a recent U.S. District Court decision finding that Boise's identical code language is unconstitutionally vague. So this is something that we have to clean up in our code or we would be also unconstitutionally vague.
And can you explain what the different for those that might be listening, what is the cleanup doing?
Yes, so the loitering plus law gives specific behaviors that we would be looking for instead of just saying, so loitering in general is just standing around. And that's something that we don't usually criminalize, right? We're not going to arrest people for standing around. But the problem is if they're standing around buying, selling, or distributing drugs, if they're standing around for the purposes of prostitution, if they're obstructing a public roadway. So we've given some very specific reasons so that it's not vague at all. Anyone who's reading this code would be clear about the type of behavior that we're criminalizing here.
Council, any questions on that?
Mr. Mayor,
Mr. Taylor.
just a quick question. Can you kind of, are we sort of copying what Boise's done in regard, or like what's maybe the distinction or differences? We're learning from that and we have to take some action being proactive here, but help me understand maybe some of the nuances maybe between Boise and Meridian and what we're trying to do.
Yes, sir. Councilman Taylor, Mr. Mayor, it seems like Boise is not going to keep their loitering code. So what we're doing here is very different. I did some research and there are loitering plus laws all over the country and those have been successful. What has happened in Idaho is not unique. These loitering codes have been facing difficulties all over the country. So these loitering plus codes have been instituted in other areas and have been very successful because they're not vague.
Thank you. The noise.
And also, if you have any questions for police, I do have Lieutenant Frazier, so he's here and can also answer any questions that you have. Our third code would repeal and replace our noise ordinance. And this update is in response to another recent U.S. District Court case in which Boise was sued by the Sierra Club. They were using a megaphone and protesting downtown. There was a kind of a preliminary injunction, and the court found that Boise's noise ordinance is likely speaker-based rather than content neutral. And so they weren't going to win that case. So they ended up changing their code, and the codes that I'm proposing are a little bit different than their changes. But I don't think that that's going to be a problem from a prosecution standpoint. I'll stand for any questions on that one.
Council, any questions or need further information on that one? Okay. Okay, any questions for Lieutenant? Anybody else?
Mr. Mayor, just
Councilman Overton.
a final follow-up. Tishra, Lieutenant Frazier, fantastic. I appreciate it. There's nothing better than making sure we're staying up on our codes, whether it's court case that makes a decision or whether it's our state legislature that makes a change. I'm pretty proud of this city and the fact that we still take care of the very important ideals that keep this city a safe place to be at night and all the time for our families and a place to work and a place to play. And these quality of life issues are very important. I mean, the voters gave us that mandate with this last election, and I appreciate your work. And as we carry forward, I think this is going to make it a lot easier on officers as well as they move forward for enforcement. So thank you.
All right, we'll see these back in the not too distant future. They have to be noticed. So how long till you expect these to come back, Bill? Is this a,
Yeah, we can put them on next week, Mr. Mayor.
okay, council, is that, you want 2 weeks?
Weeks. Okay.
2 weeks? Okay.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. All right, we have reached the end of our agenda. Do I have a motion?
Mr. Mayor, I move we adjourn.
Second.
Motion second adjourn. All in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. The ayes have it. We are adjourned. Are we ready? Council will call this meeting to order. For the record, is February 17th, 2026 at 6:01 PM. We'll begin tonight's regular city council meeting with roll call attendance.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Councilman Cavanagh.
Here.
Councilman Taylor.
Here.
Councilwoman Strader.
Here.
Councilman Whitlock.
Here.
Councilwoman Little Roberts.
Here.
Councilman Overton.
Here.
Mayor Simison.
Here, could all please rise and join us in the pledge?
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Next up is our community invocation, which will be delivered by Justin Jordan. If you'd all please join us in the community invocation or take this as a moment of silence and reflection.
Honored to be here. Let's pray. Heavenly Father, we acknowledge this evening that all authority ultimately comes from you. You're the source of justice, order, and wisdom. And as this council gathers to deliberate, make decisions, we recognize that governing authority is a sacred trust granted under your sovereign hand. You've established leaders to promote what's good, restrain harms, serve the well-being of the people. We ask for humility in leadership, courage in difficult decisions, clarity in complex issues, and integrity in every vote and conversation. Guard this room from pride, self-interest. Replace it with the shared desire for what is right, fair, beneficial for this community. Help these leaders remember that they are stewards, accountable not only to citizens, but ultimately to you. Would you bless this city, protect its families, strengthen its businesses, care for the vulnerable, and may the decisions made here contribute to peace, justice, human flourishing. We pray all this in the name of your Son, Jesus, Lord and Savior. Amen.
Amen. Thank you, Justin. Next up is adoption of the agenda.
Mr. Mayor,
Councilman Overton.
we will be vacating item number 2 as we resolve that in the work session. And other than that, we'll approve the, move that we approve the agenda as published.
Second.
I have a motion and a second to approve the agenda as amended. Is there any discussion? If not, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Ayes have it, and the agenda is agreed to. Council, anything under announcements and recognition? I will just make one that we do have the community center groundbreaking on Thursday at 1:30 at Settlers Park. For anyone who can make it, we'll see how the weather holds up. I've not been informed if this is a rain or it's rain or shine is we'll be moving forward. So snow, sleet, so any other items?
Mr. Mayor,
Councilman Cavanagh.
just want to share Billy's Celebration of Life is scheduled for the 28th of February at 1 PM. I believe at Cloverdale, but I will send that information to you all by the end of our meeting.
Thank you, Councilman Cavanagh. Okay, with that, we'll move on to public forum. Mr. Clerk, anyone signed up on this item?
Mr. Mayor, nobody signed up.
Okay, then with that, we will move on to our first action item, which is resolution number 26-2568. Appointing Carrie Graff and Jared Christensen to the Meridian Parks and Rec Commission. So council, we originally had one opening, which turned into two with the appointment of Dom to planning and zoning, which is great because we had a lot of really good quality applicants once again. And I really have to like say between planning, zoning, parks and arts, we had almost 10 people interested in every single one of these positions, which is been a lot of time, but really good because it gives us a great perspective on stuff. So Dom did help choose both of these folks. I guess he gets to say see ya and doesn't get to work with them, but felt that this would be good people. Versus Carrie Graff. And she mentioned this a little bit in her stuff, but what was really interesting is, Carrie, as she said, she's got parks in her veins. And that was, her father was very involved in parks here in Idaho and then in the state of Oregon. And so it's been part of her DNA through that. But it was through her husband's professional life that brought them back here to the Treasure Valley. He's a golf pro. So even in the family, it's part of the understanding about what happens. But she will bring, a definite, I think, larger perspective to the Parks and Recreation Commission, but a passion for service that really came from her family. So she was one person. And the other is Jared Christensen. I've actually had the pleasure of knowing Jared over the last few years through his professional work and relationship, and he's here in the audience today. But I think there's a lot of stuff that can tie into, being a principal in elementary school, what you see, what you hear, what you feel from the community, and also how, you understand, kind of what play looks like in the environment that we're all in today, with kids, whether it's special needs or just some of the everyday challenges. And, his desire coming in through Leadership Meridian, getting involved and getting engaged, just shows his continued commitment and dedication to our community. And even how he views the parks and the stories that they can tell to make it stand out more to the community. So these are the two individuals that we'd like to deliver to Steve and Joe Greer, who will be stepping back into the chair with Dom moving on for your consideration. Be happy to answer any questions or take any comments.
Mr. Mayor,
Councilwoman Schrader.
there are a lot of comments besides to say we're really happy to see such qualified individuals stepping up in our city to lead this important role. And with that, I'm happy to make a motion that we approve resolution number 26-2568, appointing Carrie Graff and Jared Christensen to the Meridian Parks and Rec Commission.
Have a motion and a second to approve resolution number 26-2568. Is there any discussion? If not, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. The ayes have it. The item is agreed to. Jared, would you like to make any comments? Okay. All right. Well, for those that didn't know him, Jared is here. You just heard his voice. And if you see him out and about or out at Willow Creek, but thanks for being here. Appreciate it. Okay. With that, we will move on to, since item 2 was a minute off the agenda, to our public hearing action item for the evening, which is public hearing for building height and drive-through text amendments, ZOA 2025-0003. We will open this public hearing with staff comments from Bill.
Thank you, Mayor, members of the council. Happy to be back with you this evening to talk about building height and our drive-through text amendment. I was in front of you in the third quarter of last year talking about some building heights and drive-through changes. At that time, there's several workshops with the council talking about building heights, and then several continuances on the drive-through standards that eventually got postponed, but got approved by council. But during that process, council's like, go change the code, come back and bring those to us so we can get the process dialed in. So The two topics tonight, as I've already mentioned, building heights and drive-throughs. So I'll go ahead and start off with topic number one, which is currently our building heights. The changes that I am proposing tonight are before you. A lot of words there, but I think council's pretty familiar with how code changes work. Anything underlined is new language. Anything struck through is old language being replaced. So our first task was how do we define residential height from non-residential height? I remember our discussion back in August. Council was clear that we want to do first make it clear for how we measure residential height and leave non-residential and mixed-use buildings alone. So the changes that I am proposing tonight only apply to, again, residential structures in this particular case. So first thing we did is we went back to our chapter 1, which is the measurement section. I think if you recall in our previous discussions, there was some discrepancy on how we measured height. We deferred to the building code, I should say. And so as we discussed with city council, we can be more restrictive in the zoning ordinance. And so this is staff's first attempt at doing that, is making it clear that in the measurement section, when we measure residential buildings heights, we're going from the average grade from the front of the property line to the very top of the roof line. There is no ambiguity as to whether or not it's to the roof plate, to the midline of the roof, where a flat roof would go to a parapet. A pitch roof is going to the peak of the roof. So that's one way to kind of stop those exceptions from happening. And then part 2 or step 2 of that affects our specific changes in chapter 2 of the code, which is the middle code section here. That is our residential zoning district. So R2, R4, R8, R15, R40 zones. Make it very clear the number 1 bullet point for the maximum height is going to refer back to that definition in chapter 1. So when we look at this, we're going to be like, anything below that, it does not apply. You go to number 1 and you go directly right to that measurement. And if they have to meet that requirement, no exceptions granted. And so same thing with the third bullet point below. That is our traditional neighborhood district. So our Old Town, our TNC, TNR. So some of those zones also allow residential homes. So we had to go ahead and make that change as well. So it married up with the R district. So I think council may be aware too, in Old Town and TNC, there are exceptions to height allowances to a conditional use permit, alternative compliance. Again, that won't apply to residential structures. It will apply to vertically integrated residential structures, multifamily structures, or a commercial building to that effect, or even an industrial building. So again, go ahead and pause on this particular topic, but I think based on the discussion that I heard from council, this is the direction you wanted to go, sticking with residential. We also had an opportunity to share this with our UDC focus group and also BCA, and they were supportive of these changes. They didn't feel like it harmed them in any way. So they feel comfortable with what the city is doing as far as building heights or the way we're moving in this direction. So I'll go ahead and stand for questions on this topic. And if there aren't any, then I'll move on to drive-throughs.
Mr. Mayor.
Councilman Taylor.
Bill, thank you. I like the clarification here. I do have a quick question. Proposing the new language that measures to the highest point of the roof or structure. And then it also says on the new point number 2 in the section just below, such architectural features shall have a maximum height limit of 20 feet as measured from the roof line. It seems confusing a little bit, roof line, and then previous it said the maximum point of the structure. So help me understand that.
So Mayor, members of the council, Councilman Taylor, certainly happy to elaborate. Currently, I think the idea was, so as I mentioned previously, if it's a residential structure, it stops at 1. So anything underneath that doesn't apply. So it goes back to the measurements. Now, where it does apply is sentence number 2 of the measurement sections for non-residential and mixed-use structures. Then those types of buildings still are eligible for those types of exemptions. And that's how we're going to interpret the code moving forward. So it's kind of that belt and suspenders approach. We're going to further restrict residential, but still leave it open for non-residential / mixed use commercial buildings for those exceptions. Because again, as you know, in our design standards manual, we like rooftop mechanical equipment to be screened and those types of things. So we don't want to be so restrictive as to back ourselves in a corner for not allowing that to occur.
Mr. Mayor,
Councilman Strader.
just a compliment. I think you nailed it. I think you really listened and I'm sad that we had to have the situation occur in my district that led us to this point, but I do really feel strongly that this is closing a major loophole in our code and that this is a really good cleanup. And I think it would be great, you know, we can talk about this as well with residents that are concerned that had those projects that impacted them directly and explain in response to that situation, this is what we did to fix that loophole. And I just think that that's really important follow through that hopefully we can do some communication and outreach. But I just really appreciate the hard work on it. I know it's not the easiest thing to nail this down, but I think you guys got it. Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate that.
Mr. Mayor,
Councilman Cavanagh.
compliment my good council member Taylor asking kind of a similar question earlier, but my other follow-up was about not an addition, but I'm probably just sensitive to the term. When I look at item 3B, it talks about, you know, a handful of things that essentially we grant exceptions to exceed the height limit. And there's a couple that kind of caught my eye that I would love just to get some insight from you. Observation towers, windmills, and my new favorite A word, appurtenances. I'm probably sensitive to it because I don't want well-intended to come back and cause mistakes. So, you know, the way I've always looked at kind of what I would classify an appurtenance is something that is life safety or a utility requirement. And so when I see things like an observation tower, why would we need an observation tower in residential? Why would we need a windmill on top of a building structure in residential? And do we serve ourselves by further defining or capping a height for anything that is viewed as an appurtenance?
Mayor, members of the council, again, this is current language in the code. It's something we toyed with. I think the draft edition had a lot of those things removed. And looking at that, I can't think of a situation where those things would be practical in Meridian, to be honest with you. I'm not sure why they were ever in the code.
Yeah.
But you're right, appurtenances leaves it open, as we discussed a couple months ago. But I felt comfortable with it because again, we just don't know what changes come to building codes. What if there's some new and inventive thing that happens and we're so restrictive we don't allow for something? I'm not saying that wouldn't happen or could happen, but I feel comfortable that based on the council's direction that you guys were just stick with residential first. You weren't too concerned about the non-residential, that I just went ahead and left that language in there, but certainly within the council's purview to make modifications to anything that's in front of you this evening.
Mr. Mayor, some feedback.
Councilman Cavanagh.
Bill, I appreciate that. And I guess I've kind of looked at that residential will be our first step, but I do think that we've got an obligation to go back and look at commercial, mixed use, et cetera, and try and provide some consistency because ultimately, I think what we're trying to avoid is, well, because this is this, it's allowed. If it was that, it wouldn't be allowed because ultimately our bosses, they don't care about what's zoned and what's residential versus commercial. They're concerned about, you know, an impact to their view or an eyesore of some sort. So I hear you when it comes to an appurtenance. We could list 20 things that we think it would be, and 3 years from now, the 21st item would emerge and we say, well, okay. I guess what I would challenge the planning department to do is to broadly define what an appurtenance it is. Has to contribute to life safety or delivery of a utility. To me, makes a lot of sense. I could be missing something, would yield to your guys' subject matter expertise. But then further, regardless of its life safety or utility need, an appurtenance can exceed 5 feet, 10 feet, 100 feet. I would look for you to sidebar that and say, okay, we're not, maybe we do need a windmill, but a 20-foot windmill on the top of a 3-story structure doesn't make a lot of sense. as I read this, it could be allowed, right? So I think that's the thing that I'm trying to get to avoiding. I know we can't capture it all, and I recognize I'm very sensitive to this. But those are some things that I think that I would look for the planning department to define, not necessarily its intended use, but the themes of why it would be allowed. And even if it falls within that, we're not going to allow it to exceed, right? Number 1 says residential structures shall not exceed maximum height. But it can, right? If it qualifies under 3. So you're saying even if it still can't exceed the building height. I misunderstood that, Bill, and Mr. Mayor, members of the council, I apologize for wasting time on that, because I think that's the piece that I'm trying to avoid.
So Councilman Kavner, if I could just maybe let you know, part 2 of this is we're updating our checklist. And I think when we talked about this topic in particular, we were going to add a checklist item that if your building has an appurtenance or some kind of exception that we would daylight, they would have to put that in their narrative and show that on their elevation. So this body knows what they're looking at and approving. It's part of that. If you recall, the appurtenance in what brought all this topic up was there was a gazebo or a pergola on top of a patio.
Yeah.
Or a rooftop terrace. And that can still happen on a multifamily building. That could still happen on a mixed use building. That could still happen on a commercial building like
Right
we have
now.
downtown. Yes. So that's why I said yes, it is a word that is a catch-all. But again, as I stated, if you're number 1, you're not going past
matter.
anything under number 1. You're staying with, you can't exceed anything. There's no mechanism.
I misunderstood the reading of it, that it could, sorry, Mr. Mayor, that it could exceed unless. And so that's where I was taking it. So I appreciate the clarification.
But Councilman Kavner, I could add that verbiage, non-residential and mixed use to that same section to make it clear that it's really for those 2 buildings.
I would be, Mr. Mayor, sorry, I realize I'm totally out of form this evening. Apologies. But to respond to Bill's question, I would be very much in support of that.
Perfect. Thank you.
Mr. Mayor,
Councilman Whitlock?
just to speak to the appurtenance. Well, I struggle with listing everything, but I like the word after that's currently in this that says usually required. And I wonder if in your process, how is usually required defined? So how do we get to the point of not having to list everything, but relying on the fact that this fire and hose tower is usually required to be on top of the building rather than next to it?
Mayor, members of the council, that's a good question. Again, I think I don't see fire here, but I could see if we get taller and taller buildings. I know we've had topics of that's a concern for Meridian to get too tall, and how do we attack those taller buildings? I don't know if that's necessitates having those types of things on top of a roof. So you do have a water tank on top to fight fires. I'm not an expert at firefighting on skyscrapers or taller buildings, but again, I think these are some placeholders. I don't know if we necessarily need that language in there. Again, I wasn't trying to reinvent the wheel too much or take out too much. Keep it simple for now. And then, like you said, I kind of like the approach of adding a little bit more verbiage to clarify point 3, and then certainly not opposed to removing water tank or power lines or anything else of that fact, if that's what the desired council is. But right now, I wanted to capture our discussion on residential heights for the moment, but certainly can keep that as a future topic if council would like that.
Mr. Mayor.
Councilman Taylor?
Bill, I apologize if I should have read it or heard it. I'm just not understanding it. I just want to make sure I'm clear. If we have a mixed use zoned project, we might have a commercial building and we might have a residential there. I just want to make sure that when we're measuring a residential, it's being measured consistently, but it's not necessarily germane to the zoning it's in. We're actually going to be looking at the structure itself, whether it's residential or commercial. My only concern is, and please clarify, is if we have a residential structure that's in a type of zoning that allows for mixed use, could there be a justification that this residential is actually commercial and so we'd measure it differently? I'm not sure if that's a hypothetical. I'm just I want to make sure that there's no loophole, since we talked a little bit about that tonight, make sure there's no a way around it to say this is not residential. It's in a mixed use application. Does that make sense?
It does. Mayor, members of the council, Councilman Taylor, I think that's why we put mixed use building on it. Because if you're going to have a live work unit, you're going to have, the definition of the code is that the bottom floor is commercial and the upper floor is residential. So in that particular case, you could go higher, but height is going to be predicated on, one, could be the use of the building, but two, it's going to be primarily zoning as well. So even in the R40 zone, you can have single family detached homes, but it requires a conditional use permit. So in that case, that single family home is not exceeding, but although R40, it's 60 feet tall. So that's something that, that's what's going to be driving that. I mean, I don't think anyone's going to build a 60-foot tall single family dwelling, detached dwelling anyways. But again, a multifamily, typically we're here telling you multifamily is residential, but under the building code, it's treated as a commercial building. It's C multi for commercial. So that's why multifamily is not part of that equation. Any other questions on building height?
Mr. Mayor,
Councilman Strayer.
if it was up to me, I would include multifamily developments in the absolute height limitation because I think we're setting ourselves up to have a similar situation occur. You could easily see a potential scenario where there's like a rooftop patio with a full wall and we could end up with an extra story that we don't want. I'm happy with the progress, so I don't want to stop the progress. I guess I would kind of hope that you guys would take a look at height limitations for the other property types subsequent to this meeting, because I think that kind of an approach is the correct approach. I share the same thought process. Like, I don't want to have us approve a 3-story commercial building and then find a 20-foot windmill on top of it. Like, I think that would be absurd. I think that height limitations should just apply and that people should have to get an exception to height limitations. That's my general approach to this, but I realize I have a lot of energy around it and I'm not sure where everybody else is at. I'm happy with the progress on residential. I just think that this approach needs to be expanded to the other property types in the future.
Anything else on this item? Okay, so drive-throughs.
Drive-throughs. So again, this coincides with the, I think back in October, this body approved the new drive-through specific use standards. And during that approval process, council wanted to treat tier 1, tier 2, tier 3 differently based on the intensity. So we always talked about high capacity drive-throughs versus your typical tier 1 drive-throughs. So we've taken, again, looked at chapter 1 of our code, redefined or updated the definition of a drive-through establishment. And then we also noted that and through the tiers underneath that definition. So there's no ambiguity again, because again, if you don't define it, then it's hard to say what it is. So that's why we put it into the drive-through standards, saying what a tier 1, a tier 2, and tier 3 is. And that links to the specific use standards in chapter 4 that you guys recently approved. So this worked with the legal a little bit. I will mention to council that some of again, words have meaning and how you say something. And so working with our legal department after council approved that, we did change those definitions slightly so that it read a little better. And so but it's the same idea of defining what a tier 1 is. It's less impact, with tier 3 being the most impact, potentially. And then what comes with that as well is during that discussion, again, you guys were fine with tier 1 and abstain administratively if possible. Tier 2, you thought should go to maybe Planning and Zoning Commission. And then tier 3, you wanted them to come to City Council for review. So I had to go back to the schedule of use tables in chapter 2 and make that a reality. So that's what you see here in the left hand of your screen. It's the allowed use table for commercial districts. And the other one is allowed drive-throughs in our traditional neighborhood districts. So you can see here, I struck out the term drive-through establishment because now we have tier 1, tier 2, tier 3. And so you can see here, a tier 1 can be an accessory or a conditional use. And the reason why a tier 1 can be a conditional use is, if you recall in the specific use standards, we said if any drive-throughs within 300 feet of a residential use, it was going to trigger conditional use. So again, all drive-throughs will still go to planning and zoning if they're within 300 feet, except for tier 3. And then tier 2, again, making it clear that it's going to the commission or requires a conditional use permit for all of them. And tier 3, the same thing. So again, marrying up based on our discussion that we discussed at City Council. So in order to make that happen, we had to go to Chapter 5 and add that to our process. So you can see here where conditional use for tier 1 could be no recommending body, and it's the director, or it could be the director approving it, or it could be the P and Z commission, just as I mentioned to you. And so it could be an administrative approval, or it could require a public hearing. Tier 2 is consistent with the director being recommending body, P and Z, and then a public hearing for those. And tier 3 is where it got a little interesting at Planning and Zoning Commission. While I was presenting this to the Planning and Zoning Commission, they expressed concern that they wanted to be that conduit for you, just like other applications where they're the recommending body on annexations, on plats. They're like, why would we treat these any differently than another application? And I explained to the commission that, well, development agreement modifications or final plats go directly to City Council. They don't require any actions from you. But I said, if that's your prerogative, if that's something that you want me to take forward to the City Council, I'm more than happy to do that on your behalf, Planning and Zoning Commission. So they, in fact, in their motion made a recommendation that tier 3s, they become the recommending body on those applications, and City Council becomes the decision-making body. And again, it's all of them, and they require a public hearing. So those are really the gist of all of the code changes around drive-throughs. Happy to stand for any questions on this particular topic.
Thank you. Bill, one point just for clarification, even though it's written, I think this is what it means, but it says 2 pickup windows. So a payment window and a pickup window are not considered two windows, or I'm thinking about the RBs. You go through RB single drive through, they have one you pay, one you pick up, even though they got 2 windows. What is that? Does that qualify under this as 2 windows or 1 window? It's pickup and payment.
Mayor,
only
members of
needed.
council, that's 2 windows. That's gonna trigger it.
Okay. Does it need to be clarified? Because it just says pickup. Is payment and pickup? Or do you just say 2 windows and not say,
Mr. Mayor,
Councilman Kavanagh?
we're trying to get your Arby's delivered to you at the payment window? Is that what we're trying to angle here for?
If it gets me there faster, I'm happy. I just want there to be clarity for everyone on what is if they say it's not a pickup window. That's what this says is pickup, not.
Mayor, I think that's a valid point, but again, the interpretation would be if the code requires them to show windows for the transaction. So if there's a transaction happening from your vehicle, that's going to be a drive-through.
Okay. All right. Council, further questions, comments? Input on the Planning and Zoning Commission recommendation?
Mr. Mayor.
Councilman Overton.
Yeah, I think it's good that planning and zoning is the recommending body on tier 3. That's a good one. All the ones that have caused us grief over the past couple of years have all been what we would now call tier 3s. And I think hopefully this will streamline a vast majority of those that don't have to come in front of us. Only the ones that are going to cause us trouble are going to be the ones that come in front of us.
And Councilman Overton, that's why I was making the clarification, because you just put every Burger King, you just put every restaurant anymore has a payment and a pickup. I don't know anyone where there's being built with one transaction window. So that's why I was highlighting that for consideration. Not gonna say they couldn't just do one and get away with it, but if that's your intention, is essentially that's what you're gonna see under that definition.
Mr. Mayor,
Councilman Taylor.
here's a question. What about those entities where you have people taking an order out in the driveway and they only have one window? How do you treat that? Or if they, you know, a Chick-fil-A will have a little tent maybe during certain hours of the day. How do we consider that? How do we treat that?
Mayor, members of the council, it's all in the definition. So it's all going to be the design of the drive-through. So if there's, give you an example where your typical McDonald's has 2 ordering points, menu boards, and then you merge into 1 lane, but you have 2 windows, that's a tier 3. It's either or, it's 2 menu boards or 2 stacking lanes, or a combination of 1 menu board, 2 stacking lanes, 2 windows. It can be many different variations of that to still be a tier 3. And again, if you remember, the specific use standards also stated, if you don't want to meet any of these standards, so let's say we had some conversations about escape lane. Well, if you recall, like, there was a restaurant on Eagle Road that came before you and asked you to approve their modification to their drive-through lane, and you denied it. Well, now they have the ability under this new code to come back and say, we can't meet the stacking lane requirement, but we still want you to act on a CUP. So they can go to city, not necessarily city council, but in that case, they probably would, because there's 2 drive-through lanes and 2 ordering points. But they have an avenue to come before you and say, hey, this doesn't work, but this is how we think it can work better without needing these things. So we do have some flexibility, but again, like the mayor says, there's no flexibility in getting out of public hearings if based on the definitions of that. We're going to have more hearings, unfortunately.
Mr. Mayor,
Councilman Schrader.
would you mind going to the definitions one more time? Mr. Mayor.
Councilman Schrader.
Yeah, so I think to me, it's the designated order areas and the stacking lanes that are more the driver of what fits into a tier 3 than just the existence of 2 pickup windows. So I'm wondering if an easy change might just be to eliminate that concept and end it after 2 or more stacking lanes, period. And then I guess we would have to modify tier 2 to say up to 2 stacking lanes. If we wanted to find the population, I guess the population of drive-throughs that are 1 lane, but 2 windows, we don't necessarily want those to go into tier 3 is my thought process. If we can, I would be in favor of that approach, because I think it's the stacking lanes to me that's a lot more of the issue, and the different order areas kind of is actually a similar thing, as you're creating 2 stacking lanes through more than 1 place to order. So that's more where I think the control should be over which category it fits into. That's just my 2 cents.
Mayor, council, that caution you a little bit on that, because we do have the specific use standards that recently changed that match the same language. So it would require modifying that section that we've already changed, because this does marry up with the specific use standards. So not impossible, just would need to maybe continue that out or bring back another code change and fix it. But just let you know that one's already, those tier 1, tier 2, tier 3 language is already in the specific use standards currently.
Mr. Mayor
Councilman Whitlock.
and Bill, so really from our prior conversations, I guess the only change that I'm sensing is that the Planning and Zoning Commission said we'd like to vet this first and have a bite of the apple. Everything else is pretty much similar to the prior conversations.
Councilman Wicklet, you're spot on. You are correct.
Mr. Mayor, follow up,
Councilman Wallach.
but that was a split vote by the commission. If I recall reading the minutes correctly, was it a 4-2 vote or something? They all weren't on board with wanting that bite of the apple or that first.
Mayor, members of the, yeah, I don't know exactly the voting on it, but I do remember that being discussed quite a bit. And like I said, once I explained the DA mod process, I think some of them, like you said, understood that it could go by them, but they just felt comfortable, like you guys didn't trust them to do this for you. And that's why we have a planning and zoning commission to weed out, vet these things through, help provide you some guidance and a recommendation. So they felt, you know, these are important to the community and we feel like we should be part of it. We should give you a recommendation on them.
Mr. Mayor.
Councilwoman Shader.
Yes, I'm curious what everybody thinks about maybe an approach where we approve the changes to the residential building heights, but maybe clean up a little bit further the definitions of the different categories of drive-throughs, just so we make sure we get it right. And then you could come back with kind of like the other changes that would need to come together. I guess I'm just curious what your feedback would be about that kind of an approach tonight. And also my colleagues, what they think about that.
Mayor, members of the council, I guess I'll go first. But couple things to be, I think, cognizant of is those the new specific use standards are in place. So if someone were to come in for a drive-through today, you know, they would not necessarily require a hearing if they could meet those dimensional standards. So that's what we talked about. That's why this was wanted to get this in front of you in case we had another tier 3 that came in. And they could submit today and we would, if it met all the design criteria like we currently have it listed in the specific use standards, it would be an administrative approval. With the caveat if it were within 300 feet of a residence, which I know in speaking with our development community, I know a couple that are looking here quickly, getting ready to submit. Not that that should change your mind in any way, but I would prefer to keep it all together, but I know the residential height is important to you, Councilwoman Strader, but it's cleaner just to package it up one deal, get the ordinance done, and then go from there.
Yeah, and Cal, what I would really, it's how much work you're gonna see. You know, personally, I brought this up just to make sure you guys were understanding that you're gonna see a lot of these that you maybe not have seen. If you're okay with it, run with it. And if it becomes too onerous, then you can make that determination if you want to be seeing them to that level or not. But I was just trying to make sure we understood that we were pulling in most new drive-throughs into tier 3. You know, unless you're, you know, TGIF handing out a window at the side of your restaurant, you're probably coming in for a city council hearing under this process. Not entirely, but that was all. So for Bill's purpose, I think it's good, but if you want to re-examine that, I would say put it in and bring it back at a later time as compared to leaving it vacant for much longer.
Mayor.
Councilman Schrader.
In light of that feedback, I guess it seems like the most prudent thing to do would be to, and I'm prepared to make a motion to approve tonight. We could see how this all plays out, right? With the drive-throughs specifically. And what, if we get a tsunami of them and how we feel about that. And if we think, okay, we are seeing a huge population of what we just consider plain vanilla drive-throughs and we decide we don't want to see that, then we could always take that approach. So if everybody's kind of nodding along, happy to move that we close the public hearing on this item.
Not yet, but we will be happy to do that when we get there.
My apologies.
Okay. Is there any more questions for staff? Okay, well then we'll go to Ms. Quirk. Anyone sign up to provide testimony on this item?
Mr. Mayor, nobody signed up.
Okay, is there anybody present that would like to provide testimony on this item, either in the room or online? or online, you can use the raise your hand feature. Anyone want to come forward? Okay, see, knowing that. Councilman Schrader?
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. My apologies for that. What a long night. So with that, I move that we close the public hearing on this item.
Have a motion second to close the public hearing. Is there any discussion? If not, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. As have it, the public hearing is closed.
Mr. Mayor,
Councilman Schrader?
after considering all staff, applicant, and public testimony, I move to approve file number ZOA 2025-0003 as presented in the staff report for today's hearing date.
Have a motion and a second to approve item ZOA 2025-0003. Is there discussion? If not, clerk call the roll.
Mayor?
Oh.
One for clarification. Would you like me to modify that language for the other exceptions to include the non-residential and mixed-use buildings as discussed?
Yeah, Mr. Mayor. Yes. Yeah, I
you.
thought that was a good suggestion.
Second agree? Okay, second agrees. It's the motion we're voting on. Okay, clerk call the roll.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor Cavanagh. Taylor.
Aye.
Strader.
Aye.
Whitlock.
Aye.
Little Roberts.
Aye.
Overton.
All ayes, motion carries, the item is agreed to. Council, anything under future meeting topics?
Mr. Mayor,
Councilman Cavanagh.
perhaps maybe you and our council president can discuss the next time you're together. Maybe some added training or a good conversation with council in light of his workshop session on, sorry, you're not here. I realize my mic is off. It's not lost on me that there's been now, I think, a couple times in the past 12 months where at least what the council thought that they were approving and what was ultimately approved and came forth were not in alignment. And I know when we had kind of our first, I think we had an education session in December. My goal is to get good feedback for where we as council need to improve. So whether that is staff level feedback, whether that is staff to staff on things that they need to make sure that they're capturing, or whether it's things that we need to be capturing in our motions to feel really comfortable that what we are voting on, what we're approving is actually what's going to come forth. I don't begin to know what the right approach is, but I see this as now a repetitive issue that is reared its head twice in the past 12 months. And it makes me at least pause, where are we erring that's allowing this to continue? And what do we need to do to resolve it so it stops?
Okay. All right, anything else in there, this item? Okay, then do I have a motion?
Mr. Mayor, move that we adjourn.
Motion second adjourn. All in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. The ayes have it. We are adjourned.